The man suddenly took off his clothes, then he asked the woman to do the same, but the next second.
なんだこれ?
The woman screamed in fright, but the assassin only told her to be quiet. He didn't harm her. However, the henchmen outside sensed something was off. When they opened the door, they saw the boss had already been decapitated. Xiang Liang immediately grabbed the woman, questioning her about who had done this. The woman trembled as she pointed at the samurai armor in the corner. After shooting at it, there was no response, but soon after, the assassin appeared behind them. These henchmen were no match for him, even though they held the truth. They were still killed by the assassin wielding a short blade. Soon, after one wave was finished, another wave came, but it still wasn't enough for him to kill. Xiang Liang felt a tingle on his scalp. Finally, when he was the only one left, he hurriedly drew his weapon to confront the assassin. He was quite capable, and surprisingly, he wasn't killed instantly. Then, Xiang Liang pulled out his handgun to chase the assassin. Unfortunately, the assassin dodged all of his shots. The assassin was distracted by this. Xiang Liang immediately seized the opportunity. He fired repeatedly, bringing the opponent down. At this moment, the third wave of henchmen arrived. Xiang Liang warned them to stay alert. There was definitely more than one assassin today. Then he lifted the assassin's mask, and to his surprise, it was a young girl. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. Only the emergency lights were still on. Outside, as a henchman picked up a lighter, a similarly dressed assassin appeared before him. He was instantly killed. This assassin was even more ruthless. She directly used firearms, killing as easily as drinking water. She showed no hesitation. The assassin even threw a grenade at the henchman. Xiang Liang was lucky not to be injured. It turned out this assassin was also a woman. Then, the two began to fight. However, just moments ago, Xiang Liang had the upper hand, but in front of this assassin, his skills were insufficient. After being stabbed multiple times, he was kicked out of the room. Knowing he couldn't defeat her, he had no choice but to beg for mercy. Now, the leader of the rioting group was dead, and all the members in the group were dead. The assassin's mission was complete. Could she spare his life? Xiang Liang had no choice but to get up and fight, but he was no match for the assassin. With just one move, she decapitated him. The assassin, Ben Ying, returned to the room, because she was wearing a special bulletproof vest. The girl, the 13, did not die. She injected the 13 with a stimulant. The girl immediately woke up, but when she awoke, she saw a dead face. The 13 was startled. Ben Ying covered the deceased girl with a sheet. The two of them were assassins from the Shadow of Death organization. This organization can buy anyone's life, as long as they pay enough money. After the mission was completed, the two safely withdrew. Ben Ying was the 13th's instructor, and she was also her mentor. The 13 made a mistake on her mission today. Ben Ying was somewhat doubtful. This kid's abilities were still lacking. They couldn't show sympathy for others. Otherwise, only they would suffer in the end. But the 13 didn't heed this advice, and she didn't accept the codename 13, given by the organization. But when she recalled her own name, her head throbbed with pain. Then, Ben Ying sent her back to Jakarta, Indonesia, for psychological training. She could only return if she passed. So the 13 began a repetitive life. She was awakened by nightmares. Then she took the special medication given by the organization. After that, it was endless training. However, every day she went to a secret location to make phone calls.
Apakah kamu meminum preskripsi yang diberikan kepadamu operator 13?
Yeah.
The conversation ended. The other side hung up the phone, because Ben Ying hadn't sent any mission instructions. That day, when the 13 returned home, she encountered a mother and son on the stairs. The mother was heavily intoxicated, and the son was taking care of her. This left a deep impression on the 13. They lived just diagonally across from the 13. In the middle of the night, the 13 was awakened by a commotion. She went to the door to check. A group of people had broken into the mother and son's home. They looked like debt collectors. She ignored it, based on the organization's principles. But the next day, the 13 unexpectedly saw the woman's corpse. The officer appeared to be gently comforting her, but there was something eerie about it. He turned around to see the 13 staring at him. He was about to move forward, but in an instant, he vanished. 2 weeks passed, and Benning still hadn't called her. The 13 was very frustrated. She stared blankly at the meatball soup. Suddenly, Wenji approached to beg for food. The 13 gave him the meatball soup. When she asked about that night, Wenji initially said his mother had died from an overdose of flour, but the 13 looked at Wenji's swollen face, and she knew he was too afraid to tell the truth. The 13 took the knife behind Wenji. The child definitely had thoughts of revenge. Only then did Wenji cry out. His mother was killed by someone. Then, the two went to Wenji's mother's grave. The 13 told him to lie down, and to say whatever he wanted. His mother would always be listening. On the way back, Wenji rested his head on the 13's shoulder. He felt the warmth of the world again. When the 13 was awakened by nightmares again, she received a hand-drawn picture from Wenji, but the front door of his home was wide open, and the people were nowhere to be found. At this moment, a small-time thug burst in. Haga on the phone ordered him to clear all evidence in the room, but after he dug out flour from the toilet, he forgot the boss's orders. The 13 saw that he was already addicted. She revealed herself directly, easily subduing him. The 13 pressed him, where Wenji had been taken. She heard Haga's name on the phone, so the 13 took him to find Haga. On the way, Jackie warned the girl not to go to her death. Although Haga was a pimp, his backing was the mayor and his son Ariel. Officer Pulla was also one of his subordinates. Haga, Ariel, and Pulla grew up together. They had also done many bad things together. Anyone who dared to provoke them would ultimately disappear.
Polisi?
Polisi? Ini Jakarta, Neng.
The two were now heading to find Haga and his twin sister, Solia. They ran the largest nightclub in the area. Jackie told the 13 to pretend to be a job applicant, but when Solia reached out to touch her, she realized the girl was a bit too strong. Jackie took the opportunity to say he needed to report on Wenji. Solia brought him to Haga. The 13 took the chance to check the surveillance footage. She found footage of Wenji being captured. The 13 was furious. She immediately knocked the guard away. The 13 came directly to confront them. She first knocked Solia down with a punch. The 13 demanded Haga to hand over the people. The man grabbed a syringe and lunged at her, but all his attacks were blocked by the 13. She also found Wenji's knife on the table. The 13 was even more certain that Haga knew where Wenji was. The 13 raised the knife and slashed at him repeatedly. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of Solia picking up a gun. She quickly shielded Haga with her body. Haga was shot dead. Solia, enraged, lost her mind. She fired several shots in a frenzy. The 13 seized the opportunity and struck Solia on the shoulder with her knife. Knowing she couldn't win, she ran out to call for help. The girl prepared to escape with Jackie, but they ran into someone blocking their path. To her surprise, there was still someone able to stand behind her. The 13 dodged and then immediately killed him, but the surveillance cameras had already captured her face. As she was heading toward the exit, the 13 was grabbed by someone. During their struggle, they fell into the nightclub on the first floor. The crowd immediately fell into a panic. In a daze, the 13 saw Solia approaching with a gun again. She hurriedly hid behind a table. Fortunately, when Solia reached her, the gun was out of bullets. The two women immediately began to fight. During the fight, henchmen came to provide support. The 13 stabbed repeatedly at one henchman's chest and pushed him onto a spike. Then, the 13 used the body as a shield against bullets, but at this point, the 13's knife had broken. Solia was still outside watching her. In a critical moment, police sirens sounded outside. The woman dared not linger in battle. She shouted in frustration, and Jackie took the opportunity to help the 13 escape through the back door. But Haga had already been killed by the 13. Jackie, who had brought the girl in, would surely be seen as an accomplice. He would inevitably face death. Jackie didn't have a good expression toward the 13. After driving a short distance, Jackie left the 13 by the roadside, but the girl kindly reminded him not to go home that night. Meanwhile, Officer Pulla was beating a man, forcing him to confess that he had driven to transport the flour. He threatened the man with his child's life. Suddenly, Pulla received a phone call. His friend Haga had been murdered. After the sadness, Pulla called his older brother Ariel to complain. The girl's killing methods were brutal and decisive. Clearly a professional. While reviewing the surveillance photos, Pulla suddenly recalled he had seen this girl at Wenji's door. Since this incident would definitely make the news, Pulla suggested to Ariel to cancel the deal with Cabby. but Ariel had his own difficulties. His mayor father was also a pervert. Ariel feared nothing, except for his mayor father. The mayor, seeing his son causing trouble, his first reaction was to have his secretary prepare backup solo campaign photos, to discard him when necessary. The mayor had originally told his son to take care of the woman he had gotten pregnant. Ariel actually dared to kill her. During the election period, he even imprisoned the woman's son, which led to such a huge mess.
Selesaikan semuanya.
Ariel didn't dare to refuse his father, but he unleashed his anger on the imprisoned Monji. On the other side, in the Cambodian forest, Bening was carrying out a cleanup mission. She was as ruthless as usual. Suddenly, another assassin, Toika, appeared across from her. Bening hadn't received any news about reinforcements. She hurriedly confirmed with her superior. It turned out that the forest was full of traitors. From the shadow of death, her superior arranged for Toika to assist in completing the mission. However, when they encountered a traitor, Toika blocked Bening, telling her to handle the target in the cabin. She dealt with these small fries. Bening forced the person out of the hay with her knife. Then they began to fight. The opponent was very strong. The battle was intense. The traitorous shadow directly removed her mask. Bening was shocked when she saw this. The girl was her former student Wolfer. To her surprise, she had actually defected from the organization. Bening was a bit angry. She began to take the matter seriously. She was somewhat emotionally conflicted. Bening did not strike immediately. The girl tried to persuade Bening. They, as shadows, had been forced to kill and do things they didn't want to do. Suddenly, a man's scream came from outside. Wolfer looked pained upon hearing it. Bening immediately realized that Wolfer was actually with the man. She was even pregnant. But once a woman became a shadow, they would be forced to lose their ability to bear children, and for Wolfer to be able to conceive. It was nothing short of a miracle. Benying's heart was completely in turmoil. She couldn't bring herself to harm Wolfer. Unexpectedly, the girl opened the door. Toika was already guarding the entrance. She immediately captured the girl for execution. On the other side, the 13 hadn't taken her medication for several days in a row. After some thought, she rode her bike to a secret phone booth. The 13 entered the password to activate emergency mode. The phone slid down, revealing the guns and bullets underneath. Meanwhile, Jackie returned home. Despite the life-threatening danger, he couldn't abandon his grandmother. Jackie sang local lullabies to lull his grandmother to sleep. At this moment, Pulla had already brought people downstairs. Before the operation, he reminded his men to remove their badges. Then he pulled the circuit breaker at home. Jackie tried to lock the door, but it was in vain. Pulla pressed him where the girl who killed Haga was. Suddenly, the intercom reported movement outside. As the henchman opened the door, he was shot in the head. Amidst the blinding white light, they couldn't locate the girl. When they followed the direction of the gunfire, there was only a corpse there. The henchman had fallen for the trap. The 13 pressed the accelerator, charging into the house against the henchman. Then she killed him outright. A few more corrupt cops came to provide support. After dodging the bullets, she picked up the gun and fought back. The 13 seized the opportunity to grip the opponent's gun barrel. She kicked it away. However, this man was also quite skilled. He removed the knife from the top of the gun and countered with a backstab. Unfortunately, it was soon snatched away by the 13, and she used it to stab another corrupt cop. After reloading, she shot directly at his head, but the bald man suddenly tackled the 13 into the kitchen, almost pressing her face into the frying oil. The 13 struggled to break free. Then she pinned him against the gas stove. Inside, Pulla heard the cries of his men. He called for people to come out and help. The bald man was still alive. He took the opportunity to grab the 13's thigh, but immediately afterward, he was doused with hot oil. The 13 used the pot as a weapon, able to attack and defend. She temporarily held them off for a while. However, she was still kicked away by the man. Pulla felt that something was off. He warned Jackie to stay in line. When the 13 kicked the door open, Pulla immediately fired his gun, but she dodged all the shots. The 13 rushed up and restrained him. She easily took the gun from him. Just as the 13 was about to demand where Wenji was, Jackie tackled her from behind. The 13 didn't want to hurt Jackie. she jumped on her bike to chase after the fleeing Pulla. The 13 aimed to shoot out the tires, but the gun was out of bullets. Pulla called for help from Ariel. After that, the 13 pressed on ahead. Just as she stopped, she was hit by a car and sent flying. Immediately afterward, Ariel struck her again. However, he didn't kill her right away. Instead, he intended to call his father for instructions, but Pulla stepped forward to taunt her. The 13, filled with fury, bit off his ear directly, then slammed his head onto the ground. She even pressed into his eye socket. When the 13 was pulled away, Pulla was already dead. Now, only Ariel was left among the three brothers. He was extremely angry. Ariel knocked the 13 out with a club. On the other side, Ben-Ing got into a retreating car, because she let the target go today. Old Fu needed to document it in the report. After that, he handed Ben-Ing a stack of documents. These were the troubles caused by the 13, and she had activated the emergency protocol without approval. Old Fu requested Ben-Ing to handle it. Meanwhile, the 13 fell back into nightmares. A woman's face haunted her. Suddenly, the 13 woke up, to find herself locked up in the basement prison of Ariel's house. Ariel was somewhat out of control emotionally, all because of a woman's son. She had, overnight, killed his two best friends. That woman had brought it upon herself. Relying on her pregnancy, the woman pressured Ariel to marry her, but his father was a candidate for governor.
Di balik masker lo itu, cuma bocah yang bisa sembunyi di balik ayahnya.
Ariel hit a sore spot. He was extremely angry. Ariel was ready to teach the girl a lesson, but at this moment, the mayor's father intervened. Ariel had just been very arrogant, but he instantly became very obedient. The old man spared the 13th's life. He thought this girl, having killed so many, could be useful to protect tomorrow's deal, and as long as Monji was in their hands, the 13 would have to obey. But the nightclub had been shut down. Ariel had no choice but to cancel the deal with Cabby. But the old man's decision was not to be questioned by his son. He directly changed the location of the transaction. After all, his campaign needed money. Moreover, the old man promised that after the deal, the 13 and Wenji would be dealt with by Ariel. After the girl agreed, Wenji and Jackie were sent to her cell, but the boy had already been beaten. Beyond recognition, the 13 gently stroked the boy. She told him not to be afraid. He would definitely get out. The following night, the 13 and Ariel were sitting in a car. Wenji was personally watched over by the old man. Jackie was responsible for driving the old man. Upon arriving at the factory, Ariel told the 13 that the deal was done. The others returned safely to the car. She needed to kill the opposing boss Cabby. It was almost a guaranteed death situation, but she had no choice but to obey. The 13 took 1 bag of flour to exchange for 2 bags of cash. After both sides checked, everything was in order. She handed the money to Ariel, but at this moment, Jackie turned around and saw that Wenji was dead. He wanted to inform the 13. Jackie was restrained by the people inside the car. The 13 had already picked up the gun. He struggled to break free and honked the horn. Then Jackie poked his head out and shouted, "Wenji is dead." The 13 turned back in disbelief. Upon hearing this, in her eyes, everything around her had become a blur. She cried out Wenji's name in agony. Meanwhile, Jackie slammed on the gas, rushing into the enemy's camp. Cabby, after the initial shock, reacted quickly. The father and son were trying to play tricks on him, so he immediately ordered his men to kill everyone on the opposing side. Ariel ran to the back of the car, preparing to draw his weapon to rescue his father, but Jackie deliberately opened the car door. Ariel was infuriated. He picked up his gun and fired. When Ariel reached the side of the car, his father was already dead. Jackie lay on the steering wheel, pretending to be dead. He successfully avoided disaster. Ariel shot like a madman. Then, he fired an explosive round. After many on the opposite side were hit, flames ignited on their bodies. Ariel threw the enemy into chaos. Jackie watched in shock. Suddenly, the 13 found him with Wenji's corpse. Seeing his men all dead, Cabby immediately got in the car, ready to escape, but Ariel jumped onto the windshield. He shot and killed Cabby. Ariel turned to look for the whereabouts of the 13 and Jackie. Jackie was struggling to move with Wenji. Just as he turned back, Solia's gun was aimed at him, but in an instant, the 13 drove the car and knocked her away. The henchmen opened fire on the car. The 13 started the car and began to drift. Once enough smoke was generated, she immediately stopped the car. Then she leaned out of the car window to retaliate, until only she and Ariel were left. The enemy's firepower was too strong. The 13 chose to evade by driving. Ariel thought she was about to flee. He quickly drove after her, but unexpectedly, the 13 made a surprise attack. Unfortunately, Ariel reacted quickly enough. He ducked to avoid the attack. Ariel gifted the 13 an explosive round. Neither of them hit their target this time. The 13 immediately made another attempt. She charged through the gunfire. In the end, Ariel became timid. He hid back in the car, and was hit by the 13. Both ran out of bullets. They both got out of the car at the same time. However, Ariel still had a bat. After taking a few hits, she seized the bat from him. The 13 swung with all her might at his head. Then she kicked him onto the burning car. Ariel got up to fight again. His attacks were much fiercer now. The 13 pulled open the car door, using the shattered glass to cut his thigh. Then, she dealt Ariel the final blow. At this point, all three brothers met their end at the 13's hands. Jackie drove off with the 13, but just when they thought they had successfully escaped, a car suddenly appeared and overturned them. When she regained consciousness, the 13 realized that she had been captured by the organization. Old Fu angrily hit her several times. The trouble was too big for anyone else to handle, so he had to step in. Old Fu warned Banning not to show mercy. She looked at her instructor, who wanted to kill her. The 13's heart was dead. Unexpectedly, Jackie lunged out and tackled Banning, but he was immediately shot dead by Old Fu. Then Old Fu aimed his gun at the 13 again. The girl desperately jumped out of the window.
Agent, you are on thin ice.
The 13 escaped to a nearby abandoned factory, but Toika was hot on her heels. At this moment, the man didn't take a little girl seriously. The price of underestimating the enemy was very high. He shot at the pillar, where the girl was hiding. Then he slowly approached. When he grabbed the girl, the 13 had already freed herself from her bindings. Her opponent was an adult male assassin. The 13 was at a significant disadvantage in strength and resilience. She was much weaker than him. She was beaten very badly. However, Toika's overconfidence gave her an opportunity. The 13 picked up a screwdriver. She plunged it harshly into his thigh. Another one pierced his wrist. Then, his body was stabbed both front and back. Finally, she slashed his neck, ending him, but Banning immediately arrived. The 13 could only hide for the time being. She intended to use a trick, but her master's strength was formidable. She locked the 13 inside the room, and threw a nail bomb inside. When Banning entered to check, the girl pushed a metal cabinet to block her. Then she hid again. When Banning found her, the 13 raised her hands in surrender. Banning softened her heart once again. She didn't shoot immediately. The next second, the girl stepped on a switch. After the blinding light flashed at Banning, she immediately lunged at her. The two women wrestled together. The girl's skills were all taught by Banning. Her moves could all be anticipated, so the 13 quickly lost her advantage. But fortunately, at a critical moment, the gun was out of bullets. The 13 immediately rushed forward. She aimed to take the gun away. After a struggle, she successfully disarmed her. In the ensuing fight, Ben Ying's sword fell to the ground. The girl applied a crucifix lock, but she couldn't hold her master down. She broke free, and drew her katana directly. She attacked fiercely without holding back. The 13 narrowly dodged. She found an opportunity to throw Banning off. Then, the 13 executed a move to catch the blade barehanded, but she was immediately kicked away by her master. The girl picked up 2 iron rods and charged forward. Both sides unleashed their most lethal moves. At this point, the master and disciple showed no mercy. Each attack was delivered with all their strength, until Banning finally showed a flaw. She was hit in the face by the 13, then she was stabbed in the shoulder. Banning was completely enraged. Her knife strikes became exceptionally fierce. In just a few moves, she had the 13 pinned to the ground. Banning wanted to press the 13 onto the broken blade, but after the girl desperately broke free, she thrust the broken blade into Ben Ying's body. Then, she swiftly severed her hand. The master and apprentice have been fighting until now, and both sides have suffered losses. Banning struck at the girl, while asking, why had it come to this? When Banning drew her dagger, there was a sudden noise from her body. It turned out that the 13 had taken the opportunity to pull the pin from the nail bomb. With an explosion, Banning faced a barrage of nails, while the 13 hid behind her and avoided the attack. She demanded to know why her master was doing this. Banning replied, This is how the world operates, but the 13 couldn't bring herself to act. Suddenly, Benning flipped over onto the girl. In a daze, she heard again a child's voice calling for her mother. At this point, the girl had given up struggling, yet she still couldn't bring herself to strike. Suddenly, Old Fu ordered Benning to act immediately. If she didn't do this, she would also die. Incredibly, Benning threw the broken blade at Old Fu, but she was shot in return. The 13 quickly picked up the gun and killed him. Benning was now on the brink of death. She refused to receive the adrenaline shot. She caressed the 13's face, recalling the time she had been on a mission, and killed the 13's biological mother. But when she heard the child continuously calling for her mother, Ben Ying's heart softened, and she spared the child. She continued to teach her. Now, Benning returned the name to the 13. In the end, Benning died with a smile in Naomi's arms. After Naomi injected the adrenaline, she set the place on fire. The next day, she buried Wenji alongside her mother, but the assassins sent to clean up the shadows confronted her. At this moment, Naomi had no ability to resist. Leading the group was 14. She had always disliked her number. As long as she killed Naomi, she would become 13, but Naomi had already quit being an assassin. Suddenly, a figure jumped out from behind her. He killed one of the shadows, and took another hostage. Unexpectedly, the 14, this madwoman, actually killed her comrade. The man had no choice but to pull out a bomb. If they didn't comply, they would all die together. After weighing her options, 14 chose to retreat. The man turned out to be Ben Ying's master Bryce. He demanded of Naomi, "Did you kill Benning?" The girl readily admitted it. He looked into Naomi's eyes, but Bryce didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he decided that from now on, Naomi would be his responsibility. Moreover, if Naomi was alone again, she would eventually die at someone else's hands, so he invited the girl to join him. In the end, Naomi extended her hand to him. The story ends here. Compared to the previous film, Night of the Cannibals, this film has a more exciting and richer storyline. The fight scenes are also very intense. It lacks many cliched fighting moves. Instead, it is more thrilling, making viewers' adrenaline surge. I must say that in recent years, Indonesian action films are still very noteworthy. For those who enjoy this thrilling and bloody experience, you might want to check out the original film. If you like my channel, please click subscribe.